When billionaire Shaheen Mirza opened the sealed trust document, he expected to see his company's name, maybe his charity foundation. But instead, he froze. His maid's daughter. A little girl with pink sneakers and a drawing pinned to his wall that said "Stay." Someone had rewritten his entire empire in her name. But why? What he uncovered next would change everything and prove that loyalty comes from the unlikeliest places. The east side of Manhattan glowed like a circuit board under glass when Kareem al-Najjar slid open the balcony door of his Upper East Side penthouse. 50 floors up, the wind thinned into a hiss. He could see the reservoir, the pinprick lamps of Central Park, and the blue spire downtown that had witnessed half his deals. He was 68, sharp as a winter edge, and lonelier than any quarterly number would admit. "Is there anyone who values the man, not the money?" he asked the city. The city didn't answer. On the coffee table lay a folder stamped NYU Langone. Inside, a staged diagnosis that would make a titan look small. Corticobasal degeneration, the kind of rare decline that steals fine motor control first, dignity second. A lie. A test. He'd scripted it with two men he still believed in. Dr. Arjun Patel, a neurologist who'd given up a fast-track academic career to run a community clinic in Jackson Heights on Saturdays. Clifton Hale, his outside counsel for 2 decades. Quiet, exacting, the kind of lawyer who could thread a needle in a windstorm. They met in the library beneath an oil portrait of Kareem's grandfather, who had crossed an ocean with nothing but a name. Arjun set a small amber bottle on the table. Short-acting beta blockers. Side effects that look like tremor and slur. Harmless. You'll feel it. Clifton slid over a flash drive. Asset firewall. While they chase control on paper, your liquidity lives here, into a blind trust only you and I can touch. They'll think they're close. They won't be. Kareem stared at his hands. Steady, for now. "We announce tomorrow. Private. Inner circle only." Clifton nodded. "And the staff?" He said, "Watch them. See who leans in. See who leans away." Arjun lifted his eyes. "You understand this could explode outside the lab you're building." Kareem said, "If loyalty can't survive a lie, it never existed." He pressed 2 pills onto his tongue. Bitter. The kind of bitter he knew how to use. At 9 a.m. the next day, in a glass-walled conference room overlooking Park Avenue, Arjun delivered the news to 3 people who lived 1 door away from power. Colin Mercer, chief of staff, late 40s, cufflinks that said he didn't borrow anything anymore. Brooke Ellison, CFO, a calculator with a pulse and a Bluetooth in each ear. Troy Bennett, head of security, ex-private contractor who called everyone boss while he counted exits. "It's progressive," Arjun said, voice clinical. "Good days and bad days. He'll step back." No one cried. They curated concern like a LinkedIn post. "For his safety," Troy offered, "we'll tighten the floor." "For stability," Brooke added, sliding an iPad open, "we'll centralize approvals." "Temporary, of course."
"Of course," Colin said, glancing toward Kareem's leather chair in the adjoining office like a tourist measuring a throne. Kareem watched the meeting on a hidden monitor upstairs, the amber medication smoothing his edges. He felt the tremor in his left hand rise like a tide. He didn't fight it. He leaned in. That afternoon, the quiet part of the building breathed different. Staff whispered, elevators opened and closed with the hush of a church door. In the service hallway, a woman in a gray housekeeping polo pressed a palm to her daughter's shoulder. "Be good, Zoe," she said. "Homework, then the word search. I'll be in 51C if someone calls." Elena Cruz had worked the penthouse floor for 5 years and never once raised her voice. Today her shift ran long. Childcare had fallen through after school in Harlem, and New York did what it always did, made mothers improvise. Zoe's curls were held back with a pale green scrunchie. A fox keychain dangled from her backpack. She didn't sit long, Quiet wasn't her sport. She drifted down the corridor until the door ajar swallowed her curiosity. Inside, a man in a dark sweater, a throw across his knees, looking at the park like it held an answer. "Hi," Zoe said, small as a breath. "Are you okay?" Kareem turned. A beat. The tremor was real now. The softness in his voice was not. "I have good days and bad days." She stepped forward and placed a paper crane on the side table. Thin white wings, creased carefully. "I learned these at aftercare. They're for wishes." "What do you wish?" Kareem asked. "That when grown-ups sign stuff, they read it 3 times. He almost laughed. He didn't. "Who taught you that?" "My abuela. She said a signature is a promise." He looked at the little crane. A totem, he thought. A thing to point a camera at later if there was a later. Down the hall, a phone buzzed in Troy Bennett's pocket. He glanced at the screen and exhaled through his nose. Unknown. "We already started without you." 7C. Troy typed back, "Who is this?" No answer. He slid the phone away and lifted his eyes toward the penthouse, where windows were finally mirrors. In the server closet 2 floors below, a tiny red light on a hidden camera blinked, recording Colin and Brooke in a whisper that sounded like a plan. Subscribe now and join the Goodness Corner family, where each tale leaves you with one timeless truth. Goodness always finds its way home. By Monday morning, the rumor had a life of its own in Midtown Manhattan. Drivers whispered about it at the 59th Street light. Assistants traded looks in the Rockefeller Center lobby. The message traveled faster than any memo. The boss was fading. Inside the top floor of Aurora Capitol Tower, the air carried that strange hush big offices get when no one wants to be the first to speak plainly. Grant Whitmore, chief of staff, walked a shade taller, as if the hallway already belonged to him. Evelyn Show, chief financial officer, kept her tone gentle, but her emails sharp. Derek Lang, head of security, had a new habit of tapping his badge on doors he'd opened for years, as if proving access meant ownership. At 9:03 a.m., Dr. Priya Shaw stepped out of the private elevator with a small leather bag and the careful expression of a physician who knows eyes are on her. She nodded to reception, didn't glance at the gossiping interns, and moved straight to the private suite behind the walnut doors. On the couch, by the window, Shaheen Sheikh Mirza sat with a knit throw over his knees, the Hudson River a sheet of silver beyond the glass. His hair, usually combed as if for a photo, had the soft disorder of a man who'd stopped pretending he had time to waste. He looked up at Priya and let the tremor bloom in his fingertips, just enough. "You're trending," Priya said dryly, setting the bag down. "Finally," Schick murmured. "Should help our experiment." "Don't forget it's still a game with knives," she said, checking his pulse, his pupils, the slack in his jaw when he exaggerated a slur. "Dose at noon. Side effects will be visible, but safe." He nodded, turning slightly so the hidden lens above the bookshelf caught the exchange. Somewhere across the city, Troy Bennett, his attorney of 20 years, an ex-public defender turned corporate guard dog, was recording from a secure dashboard. Schick could almost hear Troy's voice in his head. "Give 'em rope. I'll give you a safety net."
At 9:20, a quiet knock. Monique Alvarez, housekeeping lead, stepped in, head bowed. "Mr. Mirza? I have staff rotations for signature." Behind her, a girl's face peeked around the frame. Naomi, 8 years old, hair in a puffball ponytail, wearing pink sneakers that squeaked on polished floors. She clutched a folded piece of construction paper. "Naomi," Monique's voice turned low. "Back to the break room, baby." "It's okay," Schick said, keeping his voice warm and a little frayed. "She can say hello." Naomi slid in, eyes huge at the river view. She raised the paper like an offering. A marker drawing, 3 stick figures under a bright yellow circle. two tall ones holding hands with a small one in the middle. The tall figure on the right had gray hair and a tie. Above them, in blocky letters, "Stay." "For you," Naomi said. "When people are sick, my teacher says they need bright colors." Something pinched in Shik's chest that had nothing to do with pills. He took the drawing with unsteady fingers. His thumb left a faint smudge. "Thank you," he said, and for a second the act slipped and the gratitude was real. Monique stiffened. "We won't bother you. I'm sorry, childcare fell through." "You haven't bothered me," Shik said. "Leave her here for 10 minutes. I could use a critic while Dr. Shaw makes me swallow chalk." Naomi giggled. Priya arched an eyebrow. "Chalk you asked for." "Details," Shik said. 10 minutes stretched to 20. Naomi perched on the windowsill asking fast questions about the boats. Priya adjusted a cuff and pretended not to smile. Monique hovered by the door, torn between rules and relief. In the hallway, a shadow appeared, the clipped silhouette of Grant Whitmore. "Apologies," Grant said smoothly, stepping in without waiting. "We have the Zurich call in 30, sir. We should reschedule if you're—" He let the sentence hang, eyes flicking to the child. "Occupied." Naomi slid off the sill and stood straighter, chin up in a way that said she'd learned that posture watching adults survive hard rooms. Without prompting, she smoothed the knit throw over Shik's knees, a small, precise gesture. Grant's mouth lifted at one corner, something between a smirk and a mask. "Reschedule," Shik murmured, letting a soft stumble catch the word. "Brain fog." "Of course." Grant's gaze landed on the drawing in Shik's lap. He didn't comment. "Legal needs signatures for routine authorizations. Evelyn will bring them." Monique's eyes flickered. Routine meant urgent in Grant's dictionary. After lunch, Priya said, voice polite, tone steel, "He won't focus for the next hour." Grant dipped his head. "Whatever the doctor thinks is best." When the door clicked behind him, Shik released the breath he hadn't noticed he'd trapped. Priya capped a pen. "He's testing boundaries." "I invited him. He brought tape measures." Monique touched Naomi's shoulder. "Break room. Now." Naomi started for the door, then turned back and whispered to Shik, not shy at all, "Don't sign anything when your head feels mushy. My grandma says your name is a promise." Monique's look said, "We've talked about speaking to bosses like that." Shik's look said, "Thank you." When they left, Priya said, 8 years old and already better counsel than half your board." "Let's keep her off payroll. Safer for all of us." At noon, Evelyn arrived with a leather folio, every tab the color of a bruise. She was calm, gracious, the kind of executive who could make a wrecking ball sound like a wellness plan. "Simple housekeeping," she said, placing the folio by his hand. "Authorizations for vendor renewals, a small transfer to the Aurora Community Initiative, you announced that gift last quarter, and a liability waiver for executive transport. All things you've approved before." Shik let the tremor play across his fingers. He glanced helplessly at Priya. "We'll go slow," Priya said, stepping closer in a lab coat that hid a blood pressure cuff and a wireless mic. "Sign nothing until you've eaten." Evelyn's smile thinned a millimeter. "Of course." She pivoted to the window, pretending to admire the river, while her thumb moved under her sleeve. Texting someone. Shik studied her reflection in the glass. Hungry eyes in a borrowed view.
"Evelyn," he said, letting the consonants drag like a heavy coat. "What would you do if I missigned something?" She turned, smile back in place. "That's why you have me." Exactly, he thought. By 1, the folio was gone, unsullied. Evelyn's politeness was not. Afternoon brought a new rhythm. Naomi returned with a dog-eared library book and a juice box she insisted was for medical reasons. She read aloud while Shik pretended to doze and actually listened. Priyana pretended to chart vitals and actually watched the door. Grant reappeared at 2 with a contractor in tow, blueprints peeking from a tube. "Just exploring options for a brighter executive floor," he said, laying the roll on the coffee table like a sash. "The market loves a fresh start." Shirk blinked up at him. "My office is bright enough." "Of course," Grant said again, the phrase losing all meaning in his mouth. "Exploratory only." At 2:30, Naomi accidentally knocked over a glass. Water spread across Shirk's trousers. The medication turned his hands clumsy enough that the spill looked worse. Evelyn's assistant, Cole, walked in just in time to register the mess and the child. "I'll get facilities," Cole said, nose wrinkling. Naomi beat him to the kitchenette, grabbed a towel, and returned, patting carefully at the fabric. "It's just water," she said, looking up at Shirk as if he were the kid and she the adult. "It dries." Something in the room recalibrated, small, quiet, stubborn. Cole's expression shifted, a tiny sneer evaporating. "I'll bring seltzer," he said, escaping. Grant's jaw flexed. He didn't like problems he couldn't memo away. At 4, Troy Bennett called from a blocked number. Brianna answered on speaker. "Our friends filed a protective petition draft with a friendly judge's clerk. The gist, temporary management authority for the good of the enterprise. Not filed yet, but the outline's there. They're probing." "Names?" Shirk asked. "Grant and Evelyn," Troy said. "Derek CC'd on the security side. They kept it off company email. Rookie mistake. Cole forwarded a version to his personal Gmail. We have it." "Let them bring it," Shirk said softly. "We'll be ready." "Already are," Troy replied. "The counter is a clean conditional delegation that looks generous and eats their case alive. If they try to activate it without the 3-clinician panel, it voids itself and triggers an internal audit. The audit I just so happen to chair." "Nicely wicked," Brianna murmured. "Not wicked," Troy said. "Accurate. Also, one more thing. Anonymous tip to ACS just hit a queue downtown claiming Monique brings her child into an unsafe environment. If that wasn't Grant, I'm a tourist." Brianna goes still. Shirk's jaw tightened. "They're willing to weaponize a kid," he said, something hard settling behind his eyes. "Already called in a favor," Troy said. "A supervisor flagged the tip as low priority pending site context. But if a second call lands, someone will show up. We need optics ready, child-friendly, safe, transparent. Then we stage our own truth," Shirk said. He looked at Brianna. "You're staying late." "I had plans with my couch, but fine." He looked toward the door where Naomi's drawing, "Stay," now hung on a cabinet with a magnet shaped like a lemon. "We'll earn that word." The building exhaled after 6. The horizon went from steel to copper to plum. Brianna swapped the lab coat for a gray cardigan and set out fresh fruit and a stack of children's activity kits someone on the philanthropy team kept around for hospital visits. Monique returned with Naomi wearing a new pair of headphones and clutching the library book. They had barely settled when Derek filled the doorway, a solid block with a clipped tone. "We need to talk about unauthorized minors in executive spaces." Monique stiffened. "I cleared it with me," Shirk said, letting heat enter his voice. "She's my guest." Derek's nostrils flared. "Policy is policy. So is discretion," Shirk said. "If you're anxious about liability, stand closer."
"Evelyn," he said, letting the consonants drag like a heavy coat. "What would you do if I missigned something?" She turned, smile back in place. "That's why you have me." Exactly, he thought. By 1, the folio was gone, unsullied. Evelyn's politeness was not. Derek looked past him to the camera dome in the ceiling corner, the only lens he never seemed to notice until someone reminded him. His tongue pressed against his cheek. Understood. He left. The room felt bigger as soon as he did. Naomi tugged Shik's sleeve. What's liability? A word grown-ups use when they forgot other words like care, Priya said, deadpan. Naomi nodded solemnly, as if that was obvious. They read 2 chapters. Naomi leaned on the arm of the couch and hummed a tune her grandma liked. The building lights blinked into stars. For a few nice minutes, the world pretended it was simple. At 7:12, the intercom buzzed. Reception's voice came thin and apologetic. Mr. Mirza, 2 representatives from Administration for Children's Services are here to conduct a welfare check. They say they received multiple calls. Monique's hand flew to her mouth. Naomi looked up, confused. Send them up, Shik said. His voice was calm enough to be scary. He turned to Priya. Doctor, would you mind staying as a neutral observer? Priya rolled her sleeves. I'll be Switzerland. Monique's eyes were shiny. They can take her. Not tonight. Not while I'm here. Naomi slid closer on the couch until her hip touched his thigh. A minute later, the elevator doors opened again. 2 ACS workers stepped in. Jada McKinney, mid-30s, with a clipboard and warm eyes that missed nothing, and Marco Ruiz, younger, focused, no nonsense. Derek trailed behind them, affect neutral, gaze flat. Jada took in the room in one slow sweep. Fruit on the table, activity kits, evening news muted on the wall, a child's drawing on the cabinet spelling stay in wobbly letters. Her shoulders eased a fraction. Good evening, she said. We received a call, actually more than one, claiming a minor was present in a high-risk environment. We're here to verify safety. Monique found her voice. She's my daughter. I'm all she has. My sitter canceled. I didn't want to lose my shift. Jada nodded. You did the right thing by keeping her with you. Marco's eyes flicked to Shik. And you are? Shik Mirza. This is my office. You are welcome here. Jada's gaze moved to the girl. What's your name, sweetheart? Naomi, she said. We read books here. That looks like a cozy place to read, Jada said. She turned to Priya. And you are? Dr. Priya Shah, Priya said, holding up her hospital ID as reflex. I'm Mr. Mirza's physician. Also an adult who doesn't like seeing families punished for being practical. Jada's mouth twitched. Noted. Marco walked the perimeter like a baseball ump trekking bases. No hazards, no clutter, nothing but money arranged neatly around a single, stubborn human moment. Jada set her clipboard down. To close this out, we do need to verify some employment details and note where the child is during shifts. If there's a quiet room you can reserve when emergencies happen, there is. And there will be a formal policy by morning, with pay protection. My mistake for not making it sooner. Derek shifted. Jada glanced at him, catching the movement. And you are? Head of security. We enforce safety. Good. Then you'll help write the policy so it works in real life. She turned back to Naomi. Last question. Do you feel safe here? Naomi looked at Shik, then at her mother, then back to Jada. He's nice, she said, pointing at Shik. And the fruit is sweet. And Dr. Shah said liability is a word for people who forget care. She paused. Can I keep coming if I bring my headphones? Jada coughed a laugh she tried to hide. That sounds reasonable. She signed her form with a clean, decisive flick. We're closing this as unfounded. Miss Alvarez, we did nothing wrong. Mr. Mirza will expect that policy email by 9. You'll have it by 8. They left with soft goodnights. The door clicked shut. The room stayed quiet for a beat that felt like a prayer. Monique exhaled so hard it turned into a shaky laugh. Naomi resumed her spot and leaned into Shik like a kid who trusted her read of a room more than any badge. Priya looked at Shik over the rim of her water glass. "They came for optics," she said. "You gave them evidence." "Someone wanted a panic," he said. "They got a plan." His phone buzzed. A message from Troy. "They're escalating. Draft petition now filed for morning calendar. Also, check the Aurora Community Initiative line item Evelyn House kept. It isn't our initiative." Shik's pulse ticked faster. He opened his email, pulled up the donation ledger, clicked through a benign-looking PDF, and landed on an EIN registration page that had been quietly amended last week. The beneficiary was no longer the real Aurora Foundation. It was Aurora Community Investments LLC, a shell out of Delaware. Manager listed as C. Whitmore Holdings. Grant's private vehicle. Below it, a second paper trail pointed to a support contract routed through Lang Protective Consultants, Derek's side entity, billing corporate rates for after-hours risk mitigation. Not just greed, a coordinated skim. Shik felt the anger come, clean and cold. He didn't chase it away. He looked at the child's drawing on the cabinet. Stay. He said, "Priya, tomorrow I'll forget a meeting and we'll let them run point. While they're on stage, Troy will flip the lights." Priya nodded. "You wanted a test. Now you have one." Naomi yawned, heavy and honest. "Can we finish the chapter?" "We can," Shik said, reaching for the book with a hand that didn't tremble at all. He felt Priya's eyes on him. She said nothing. He read until Naomi's head tipped onto his arm and the pink sneakers stilled. Monique mouthed "thank you" and scooped her up, careful as if the room were made of glass. When they were gone, the suite hummed with the low sounds of a city that never really sleeps. Shik stood and crossed to the window. Far below, FDR Drive flickered like a wire. Somewhere in that web, Grant was drafting a statement about leadership transitions. Evelyn was polishing a spreadsheet she'd swear existed for months. Derek was billing an hour. Shik pressed his palm against the cool glass, then took out his phone and opened a note he'd written weeks earlier and never sent. "Tomorrow, I stop pretending." He didn't hit send. Not yet. The intercom buzzed again, one soft tone. After-hours reception. "Mr. Mirza, a courier just arrived with a sealed envelope. No return address. It's marked for the man with the tremor." Priya looked up. "That's either poetry or a threat." "Both," Shik said. He opened the door to the empty hallway, bent and picked up a heavy envelope. Inside, a single USB drive and a post-it with 4 block letters. "Do not trust Troy." For the first time all day, something like doubt moved through him. He turned the drive over in his palm. No logo, no clue. "Don't plug it in here," Priya said. "I won't," he said. He set the drive on the table like a piece on a chessboard. Across the glass, the city's lights blinked like impatient cursors. In the reflection, Shik saw himself, the old version and the one he hoped to become, standing between a child's drawing and a warning that could blow up his only safety net. Tomorrow would test staff. Tonight, tested trust. Subscribe now and join the Goodness Corner family, where each tale leaves you with one timeless truth. Goodness always finds its way home. The envelope lay on the table like a question nobody wanted to answer. The USB drive was small, plain, no label, no seal, just the faintest scratch along one edge, like it had been jammed into a port in a hurry. Priya folded her arms. "If that thing carries malware, we lose every file, every recording, every shred of proof you've built." Shik gave a small nod, "Which is why we open it somewhere that can afford to burn." He slipped the drive into a side pocket of his jacket. "I know a place." By morning, the city was gray and humming. At 7:30 a.m., Shik's car eased off Lexington Avenue into the underground garage of a co-working space called Foundry Labs, a former newspaper print floor now converted into private pods. It had one advantage: no connection to Aurora Capital's network. Inside a small cubicle that smelled faintly of espresso and toner, he plugged the drive into a loaner laptop Priya had sterilized overnight. The screen blinked twice, then opened a folder labeled Project Horizon. Inside were PDFs, dozens of them, each marked with the Aurora Capital watermark. But the contents weren't financial. They were contracts between Aurora Capital and a list of offshore shell companies, one name repeated across multiple agreements: Bennett Strategic Holdings. Shirk froze. Bennett. Troy Bennett, his attorney. He clicked another file. Inside, correspondence, time-stamped over the past 6 months. Emails between Troy and Evelyn Cho, written in the language of careful betrayal. Phase 3 complete. Once the medical petition is filed, we liquidate his domestic holdings and roll the trust into BSH accounts. He'll be too sedated to contest. Priya, reading over his shoulder, swore softly. He was building a second trap under yours. Shirk leaned back, heartbeat drumming in his ears. Troy's the one who suggested this entire test, he said. He designed the fail-safe contracts, the blind trust, everything. He also made sure he was the only one with keys, Priya said. Classic misdirection. He played loyal counsel to the end. On the last page, a name appeared that neither of them expected. Naomi Alvarez. Collateral risk minimal. Child visits offer perfect optics. Maintain appearances until transition complete. Shirk closed the laptop. The room seemed to tilt. Optics, he said quietly. They're using her as proof of my humanity. Back in the penthouse, the air felt too still. Naomi's drawing still hung on the cabinet. Stay, letters a little crooked, bright yellow sun half off the edge. At 9:15, Evelyn arrived with a soft knock, pretending surprise when she saw him dressed, standing. Mr. Mirza, you look strong today. Good days and bad days. Today's good. I'll let Grant know. We're finalizing tomorrow's board agenda. There's concern about the continuity plan. The judge may require immediate guardianship. Guardianship. He rolled the word around. You will make excellent parents. Her smile didn't falter, but her pupils tightened. We only want to protect your legacy. Of course you do. She hesitated, reading his tone, but didn't dare challenge it. After she left, he poured 2 cups of coffee, one untouched. When Priya arrived, he pushed it toward her. We confront him today, Shirk said. Troy? He nodded. If he's turned, we need his confession on camera. If he's not, he deserves a chance to prove it. 11 a.m., Bryant Park Cafe. The spot was public, safe, too visible for dirty work. Troy Bennett arrived exactly on time, navy coat, polite smile, phone in hand. You look good for a man on borrowed time, Troy said, sitting. Medication's working? Maybe too well, Shirk said. It cleared my head. That's what we wanted, right? Clarity. Shirk slid the USB drive across the table. I found this. Troy's hand stopped mid-reach for his cup. I plugged it into a burner laptop, Shirk continued. So whatever you plan to erase, it's already backed up off-site. A flicker crossed Troy's face. One heartbeat of calculation before the mask returned. You shouldn't open anonymous drives. Could have been a setup. It was, Shirk said. Yours. Silence. Bryant Park traffic whispered around them. Troy sighed, shoulders slumping like a man shedding weight. You weren't supposed to see that yet. So it's real. I told you, this game was dangerous. They were always going to come for you. I just aligned incentives. You sold me out. I protected myself, Troy said. And before you judge, ask what you'd have done if you'd watched empires collapse around you for 20 years. Loyalty doesn't pay severance. Priya's voice, small and hard, came through the lapel mic under Shirk's jacket. Keep him talking. Shirk leaned in. You could have come to me. Troy shook his head. You were too busy playing God, faking illness, pulling strings, testing everyone's morality like lab rats. You wanted to see who'd betray you. You made it inevitable. He stood, leaving the drive on the table. It's poetic, in a way. You built a maze so perfect you got lost in it yourself. Not yet, Shik said. Troy smiled thinly. Then I'll see you in court. Or the headlines, whichever comes first. He walked away without looking back. Priya joined Shik seconds later. We got the recording. Everything. Shik stared at the empty chair. Everything except his endgame. The next morning, New York was half awake and rain-streaked. The streets gleamed with taxi lights and ambition. Shik Mirza sat in the back of his car, silent, as the skyline slipped away behind him. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that message, "Find the trust document signed in Delaware. It names the heir." By 8:45 a.m., the car rolled up to Wilmington, Delaware, the quiet heartbeat of America's corporate secrets. Glass buildings stood beside small law firms with golden plaques and polished doors. Shik entered Lansbury & Cole Associates, the address from the unsigned text. Inside, the lobby smelled like polished wood and money. A receptionist smiled with the efficiency of someone who had learned never to ask too many questions. "Mr. Mirza," she said, glancing at her monitor. "Mr. Lansbury will see you now." Henry Lansbury looked like the kind of man who'd been drawing up trusts since rotary phones. His suit was 3 shades darker than his skin, and his glasses magnified his eyes just enough to make them seem honest. He rose to shake Shik's hand. "It's been a long time, Mr. Mirza. I didn't expect you'd ever visit us in person." "Apparently someone else did," Shik replied. Lansbury's brow furrowed slightly. "I beg your pardon?" "You executed a trust amendment 2 weeks ago. My signature, my seal, all fake." Lansbury's fingers paused on the paperweight. "That's impossible. We only process instructions verified through your counsel." "Troy Bennett?" The lawyer nodded slowly. Shik pulled a folder from his briefcase and laid out the printed emails from the USB. "He's no longer my counsel. You'll want to reconsider your record-keeping." Lansbury's color drained. I see." He opened a locked drawer and withdrew a thick manila envelope. There was a clause added, unusual one, a new beneficiary but sealed under confidentiality. I wasn't allowed to disclose it unless you were present in person. He slid the envelope across the desk. Shik's fingers hovered over it, pulse steady. When he opened it, the name staring back at him hit harder than any corporate betrayal. Beneficiary, Naomi Alvarez. He read it twice, then a third time, the letters refusing to make sense. Lansbury looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Bennett said she was your granddaughter, that the trust was being restructured for her education and welfare." "She's not my granddaughter," Shik said quietly. "She's my maid's child." Lansbury's mouth opened then closed. "Then someone wanted to tie her to your estate for reasons beyond charity." Shik folded the document carefully. "Print me every file associated with this trust. Originals, amendments, correspondence." As Lansbury moved to the printer, Shik stepped aside and called Priya. She answered on the second ring, background noise of traffic behind her. "Tell me you found something good," she said. "I found something," I replied. "They rewrote the trust to name Naomi as my heir." Silence. Then, what? I thought they were framing me as incompetent. Turns out they wanted a face, a sympathetic heir to legitimize the transfer. They'd control her through her mother. Use a child as a puppet. Smart and disgusting. There's more. The documents came from Bennett's firm, but someone inside added the clause. Meaning Troy might not be the only traitor.
Gasps, murmurs. Grant half rose. Sheik, maybe we should... He cut him off. Sit down, Grant. You're trending next. He pressed a small remote. The wall screen behind them came alive. Hidden cam footage from the penthouse. Signed contracts. Troy's recorded confession. Gasps turned to silence. This is what I've learned, Sheik said, calm now. Money measures what people will do for you. Loyalty measures what they won't. Some of you failed the test. Security, led by Priya's silent signal, stepped in. 2 men moved to collect Grant and Evelyn. Troy sat perfectly still. Plot twist number 1, Sheik said, softly, eyes locked on him. The maze wasn't mine, it was yours, and you walked me right to the center. Troy finally spoke. You think this clears you? They'll eat you alive in court. Sheik smiled faintly. Maybe, but not tonight. He handed the remote to Priya. Send it to the boardroom feed. She nodded. Done. In less than 60 seconds, every executive in Aurora Tower was watching. When the police escort left with Grant and Evelyn, and Troy vanished into the noise of reporters outside, the room emptied fast. Only Sheik and Priya remained. She poured him a glass of water. That was dangerous theater. It bought time, he said. But something's missing. That drive didn't come from Troy. It exposed him. Which means someone else sent it. Who? He looked toward the skyline, the reflection of Naomi's drawing still in his mind. Whoever still believes loyalty matters. He checked his phone. A new message. No sender ID. Not over. The will was never the real plan. They buried another clause. Find the trust document signed in Delaware. It names an heir. An heir? Priya asked. You don't have family. Apparently, he said. I do. He closed his eyes. The city lights painted the window in gold and blue. Somewhere below, a little girl in pink sneakers was probably asleep, unaware that her name had appeared once before on a forged contract. The next move wasn't corporate. It was personal. Tomorrow, he'd go to Delaware. And if the message was right, someone in there had already decided who would inherit his empire. And his name. By evening, Sheik was back in Manhattan. The clouds had cleared, replaced by a hard winter sky. He met Priya in his study, the city glowing behind her like circuitry. He spread the papers across the desk. Look, Bennett's signature, Evelyn's initials, and this, Grant's notarization. They all knew. Priya flipped to the last page. And here, the notary stamp is from Aurora Tower's own legal department. They didn't even hide it. Sheik exhaled. They wanted to trigger a media storm. Terminal billionaire leaves fortune to Maid's daughter. They'd sell it as a redemption story while they siphoned everything. They were going to make her the face of your downfall, Priya said. They'd own the narrative and the company. He looked out the window, the reflection of his own weary eyes. They underestimated one thing. What? He turned to her. I don't break quietly. That night, Sheik summoned Monique to the penthouse. When she entered, nervous, he gestured for her to sit. Naomi trailed behind her, clutching a small stuffed dolphin. Monique, I need you to tell me if anyone has approached you, anyone offering help or protection. She hesitated. A woman called me 2 days ago. Said she worked with Mr. Bennett. She wanted to set up a trust fund for Naomi. She said it was your idea. I didn't believe her. What did she ask for? Naomi's birth certificate and permission to use her name publicly. Priya's eyes widened. They were going to file a press release. Shirk leaned forward. If they call again, tell them yes, but forward the time and place to me. We'll be ready.
Attending a signing ceremony, Shirk said coolly. Isn't that what you called it? Behind him, 2 uniformed officers stepped in, followed by Priya holding a recording device. I'd introduce my security team, Shirk said, but you already tried to hire them last month. Troy's calm cracked. You set me up. No, Shirk said. You set yourself up months ago. I just gave you the spotlight. He gestured to Priya, who pressed play on her phone. The recording of last night's call filled the room. Bring your daughter, finalize her paperwork. Troy's jaw tightened. You can't prove intent. Shirk held up a document, the forged will from Delaware. I don't need to. You committed wire fraud, identity falsification, and attempted misappropriation of a minor's name for profit. The feds love tidy cases. The officers stepped forward. Troy's final words before they cuffed him were quiet, venomous. You think this ends with me. You don't know who really sent that drive. Shirk watched him go, expression unreadable. The penthouse was quiet again. Naomi slept on the couch, a blanket tucked under her chin. Monique stood by the window, tears in her eyes. You saved us, she whispered. No, Shirk said softly. You saved me. Priya approached, phone in hand. News broke an hour ago. Bennett, Cho, and Whitmore all indicted. You're officially the last man standing. Shirk nodded, for now. She hesitated. You believe what he said, that someone else is behind this? He glanced at the Delaware envelope still on the desk. Whoever sent that drive didn't do it to help me. They wanted me to destroy my own counsel before the real fight began. Which means, Priya asked, it means we're halfway through the story. As he turned off the lights, he noticed something taped to his office door. A child's drawing, new this time. 2 stick figures holding hands under a blue roof. Naomi's handwriting, "Thank you for staying." He smiled faintly, but beneath it his gears in his mind kept turning. The Delaware Trust, the forged will, the anonymous USB, all threads leading somewhere darker. And at the bottom of one printed email, in the small metadata line he hadn't noticed before, a sender code caught his eye. Origin at auroracorp.ai. He frowned. AI? He murmured. But Aurora had no AI division, not officially. He looked out over the sleeping city. The lights seemed to blink back in quiet rhythm like an unseen system breathing beneath the streets. Whatever he'd uncovered, it wasn't just greed anymore. It was something bigger. Tomorrow he'd find out who, or what, really started Project Horizon. Chapter 5. The Shadow Beneath the Glass. Morning sunlight split across Aurora Tower, glinting on mirrored glass as if trying to polish away what had happened the night before. But the building couldn't hide what it had become, a palace built on deceit, now stripped of its crown. The arrests had made headlines. Every network replayed the footage of Troy Bennett, Grant Whitmore, and Evelyn Cho being let out in handcuffs. Billionaire CEO exposes secret conspiracy within Aurora Capital. Mirza sting operation shocks Wall Street.
The public saw a victory, but Sheikh Mirza knew the war wasn't over, because someone was still pulling strings. Priya Shah found him in the study, eyes fixed on a frozen security frame on his laptop, an image of Troy in the conference room seconds before his arrest. You haven't slept, she said. I've been watching this. Troy was surprised when I walked in, but not afraid. Look at his face. Priya leaned over the screen. That's not shock. It's recognition. Exactly, Sheikh said. He knew the plan had already moved past him. He wasn't the end. He was the cleanup crew. Priya frowned. So who's left? I don't know. But whoever they are, they had access to my private cloud, the trust documents, the signatures, the Delaware filings. And? He turned the screen. On it was a line from the metadata on the forged will. File origin, auroracorp.ai/Project Horizon. An internal system,
she said slowly. Not a person. Maybe both. By noon, Priya had assembled what was left of Aurora's IT department, 2 engineers and 1 terrified intern. They met in a secured lab on the 34th floor, surrounded by silent rows of servers. Project Horizon was decommissioned years ago. It was supposed to predict insider trading by tracking employee patterns, but after the SEC audits, we shut it down. Then why is it still active? Priya asked. Miles hesitated. Because someone revived it? Sheik stepped closer. Can it send emails? Only internally. It doesn't have outside access, unless someone gave it permission. Who had that authority? Miles swallowed hard. You, Mr. Mirza, and Marcus Hale, your late co-founder. Sheik froze. Marcus had died 5 years ago. Car crash, late at night. But Marcus had also been the company's most brilliant coder, the architect of Horizon's neural system. Pull every log file you can. I want to see who it's been talking to. That evening, Sheik drove north, past the Bronx, across the Tappan Zee Bridge, into a quiet town called Ridgefield. Marcus's widow, Dana Hale, still lived there in a house overlooking a lake. When she opened the door, her eyes widened. Shaheen Mirza, after 5 years. I'm sorry to come unannounced. It's about Marcus. Dana's face softened with a sadness that hadn't faded. He'd have liked that. Come in. The living room smelled of cinnamon and old books. Pictures of Marcus lined the mantel, his easy grin, his messy hair, his hand on Dana's shoulder. I think Marcus built something inside Aurora that never died, something called Project Horizon. It's been sending messages. Messages? Encrypted ones. Files that exposed corruption before it happened.
He picked it up. It wasn't crayon. It was printed text. Project Horizon has completed its purpose. The successor has been chosen. Protect her. She will inherit not your fortune, but your lesson. There was no signature, just a faint watermark at the bottom of the page. Origin at auroracorp.ai. Schick stared at it for a long time before setting it beside Naomi's drawing. He finally understood. Marcus's code hadn't been watching for thieves. It had been watching for hope. The AI hadn't chosen Naomi for wealth. It had chosen her for goodness. And now the responsibility to guide her, to keep her from becoming what he once was, belonged to him. That night, Schick stood on the balcony overlooking the city that had both crowned and condemned him. Priya joined him, silent for a long while. "So, what happens now?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Now, I stop pretending to be sick. I start learning how to be human." Priya laughed softly. "And her?" He looked at the small light glowing from Naomi's window down the hall. "She'll grow up knowing the truth. That loyalty isn't a test, it's a choice." The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of Naomi's laughter through the open door. For the first time in years, Schick felt at peace. Not because he had won, but because he finally understood what was worth losing everything for. He turned to Priya, his voice low. "Marcus built a machine to find loyalty. Turns out it found something better." "What's that?" "Goodness," he whispered. And somewhere deep in the dormant servers of Aurora Tower, a single line of code blinked once. The city was restless that night. A light drizzle softened the hum of traffic outside Aurora Tower where the lights still burned on the top floor. Inside, the air buzzed with a strange energy,
half relief, half fear of what still lingered unseen. For the first time in months, Shik Mirza sat without his cane. The tremor had eased, but his thoughts hadn't. The message from Horizon, Marcus's ghost in code, looped in his mind. Protect her. She will inherit not your fortune, but your lesson. Across the penthouse, Priya typed furiously, trying to recover fragments from Horizon's wiped servers. Monique sat nearby, watching her daughter Naomi color at the dining table. The child hummed to herself, oblivious to the magnitude of what her name had come to mean. Shik watched her, how her laughter filled spaces money never could. It reminded him that the empire he once worshipped had been built on numbers, but the only thing that saved him came from something numbers couldn't define. At 9:07 p.m., a notification flashed on Priya's screen. Recovered file, Marcus Hale, final voice note.mp4. She gasped. Shik, I think Marcus lefting... Shik crossed the room in 2 steps. The file opened to a dimly lit video. Marcus Hale appeared, thinner than Shik remembered, sitting at his old desk, face illuminated by blue light. If you're watching this, I'm gone. And if Horizon has activated itself, it means the system worked. I built it to measure what humans forget to value: compassion, consistency, courage. You wanted a tool to protect wealth, Shik. I built one to protect worth. And someday it was bound to choose someone better than us. Don't fight it. Teach her. Because loyalty without kindness is just obedience, and we had enough of that in our world. The video froze on Marcus's faint smile. Naomi looked up from her drawing. Who's that? Shik swallowed. An old friend, and a very good teacher.
Days passed. The media storm faded. Aurora Capital slowly stabilized. The Horizon Foundation taking shape in its place. Shik stepped down quietly, transferring control to a board of trustees Priya helped him assemble, half technologists, half social advocates. But his most important task was simpler. Every afternoon, he spent an hour with Naomi, teaching her not about money, but about people. How do you know if someone's loyal? She once asked him. You don't, he said. You just give them the chance to prove it. She tilted her head. Like you did? He smiled. No, sweetheart, you did. The Grand Hall of Columbia University shimmered with warm light as leaders, reporters, and philanthropists gathered. It was the inaugural gala for the Horizon Foundation, a program funding scholarships for children of working-class parents across America. Shik stood backstage, watching Naomi clutch the microphone on stage. Her pink sneakers had been replaced by sparkly flats, but her smile hadn't changed. When I first met Mr. Mirza, she said shyly, he looked sad. I gave him a drawing to make him feel better. I didn't know it would change everything. He taught me that kindness can be louder than money, and that being small doesn't mean you can't do something big. The audience rose in applause. Monique wiped her eyes. Priya grinned from the front row. Shik stood in the wings, silent, proud, humbled. The lights on stage caught the silver in his hair, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a man who had everything. He felt like a man who had enough. That night, as the guests left and the city's rhythm softened, Shik sat by the window overlooking Morningside Heights. Naomi's drawing hung on the wall behind him, the original one, the yellow sun with the word, stay.
Shik whispered to the empty room. I did. Somewhere, deep in Aurora's backup servers, a dormant system blinked to life for one last time. A message appeared across the old code. Loyalty verified. Goodness restored. And with that, the screen went black forever. If this story moved your heart, don't let it be the last one you hear. At Goodness Corner, every story reminds us that loyalty, truth, and kindness still matter in our world. It was dawn again in New York, that hour when even the skyscrapers seemed to exhale. Aurora Tower glowed faintly gold, as if nothing inside it had ever been broken. But Shik Mirza knew better. For weeks, the building had been under quiet investigation. His enemies were gone, Bennett in custody, Evelyn and Grant negotiating plea deals, but the ghosts remained. He'd exposed every betrayal except one. Who created Project Horizon? The email address still pulsed in his mind like a riddle. origin@auroracorp.ai. The suffix didn't belong to any known department. Not HR, not legal, not PR. It was something deeper. Buried under Aurora's old research archives. So that morning, he called the only person who might know. Priya arrived in jeans and a hoodie, hair tied back, laptop under her arm. The doctor was long gone. The engineer in her had returned. Found it, she said, dropping the device onto his desk. Aurora AI Systems, defunct project from 5 years ago. Built to monitor insider trading patterns using predictive analytics. It was shut down after regulators got nervous. Who ran it? Shik asked. Your late co-founder Marcus Hale. Shik leaned back. Marcus? He died in that car crash on the FDR. Maybe not all of him, Priya said. The AI code he wrote still runs on a shadow server. It's been auto-generating emails flagged for risk assessment. That USB drive? It didn't come from Bennett. It came from the AI. Triggered when it detected overlapping fraud behavior among your executives. He stared at her, disbelief slowly morphing into awe. So you're saying an algorithm saved me? An algorithm trained to detect greed, Priya said. Marcus built it to protect you. For the first time in months, Shik laughed. A raw, quiet laugh that sounded like someone coming up for air. By evening, the sky outside Aurora Tower burned orange. Shik stood before the floor-to-ceiling window where everything had once begun, lonely, powerful, and afraid. Now, it felt like standing on the edge of something new. Behind him, Monique and Naomi entered quietly. Naomi ran up to him holding another drawing, her latest masterpiece. This one showed a man, a woman, and a little girl standing in front of a tall building with a sign that read, Home. You made this? He asked. Naomi nodded proudly. You said the building was lonely, so I fixed it. He crouched to meet her eyes. You did more than fix it, Naomi. You gave it a heart. Monique smiled, eyes glassy. We'll never forget what you've done for us. I should be thanking you, he said. You reminded me that all the wealth in the world can't buy a clear conscience or a child's kindness. He handed Monique an envelope. Inside is a deed transfer. You and Naomi now own this floor. Call it rent for teaching me what loyalty actually means. Monique shook her head, tears slipping free. You can't. You already have, he said gently. A month later, Aurora Capital held its first press conference under new leadership. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered. When Shik stepped to the podium, the room fell silent. He looked out over the crowd, faces that had once feared him, now waiting for something human. I built Aurora to be an empire. And in doing so, I forgot that empires don't last, people do. We measured success in billions when we should have measured it in integrity. He paused, hands steady on the podium. Every company makes mistakes. Mine almost cost lives, but from those ashes, something better has to grow. He gestured to the screen behind him. The logo appeared. The Horizon Foundation, dedicated to funding education for children of single parents and blue-collar workers. In honor of those who reminded me what loyalty looks like, because the truest currency isn't gold, it's trust. The crowd rose in applause. Days passed. The media storm faded. Aurora Capital slowly stabilized, the Horizon Foundation taking shape. Summer sunlight spilled over Central Park. Shirk sat on a bench, wearing sunglasses and a linen jacket, watching Naomi chase pigeons while Priya scrolled through her tablet beside him. "Foundation's already helped over 10,000 kids," she said. "You realize you've accidentally built another empire." "This one doesn't need guarding," he said. "It grows on its own." She smiled. "And the AI?" "Archived, but sometimes I think it still watches. Maybe loyalty doesn't just belong to people." Naomi ran back, weaving a small folded paper. "Look, I wrote a poem." She read, proud and loud. "A man once pretended to be sick, but his heart was the thing that healed. He found a friend, a daughter, a home, and learned that truth can't be concealed." Shirk blinked hard, pretending it was the sunlight. He lifted her onto the bench beside him. "You're going to make every billionaire cry."
"Good," Naomi said. "They should remember to share." He laughed softly, the sound drifting into the warm air. As Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder, Shirk looked at the horizon. The same skyline that once felt like a prison, now glowing like promise. He whispered, mostly to himself, "The test is over." And for the first time in his life, the man who once had everything finally felt whole.